Language and inequality. There has been research which has been pointing out that language is related to issues of inequality. So if you look at some of the research, you have Tollefson, a very renowned figure in terms of his research in language and inequality, but he uses this structural historical approach. It's a macro level study across 7 countries, and Tollefson comes to this conclusion that language policy becomes a mechanism that forges or establishes and maintains the privilege of the dominated. So it becomes a tool or a mechanism through which the social prestige, the social status, the social and economic gains of the dominated class are maintained. You have this concept of linguicism emerging from Skutnabb-Kangas, 1998. Again, a very excellent paper, excellent study that talks about these insights into this concept of language-based racism, which she calls linguicism. So almost like races are discriminated against, similarly, languages are also discriminated against. And when languages are discriminated against, by implication, it means that the speakers of those languages are also discriminated against. So by discrimination, we would mean that they are treated in different ways, in unequal ways, so as that they are disadvantaged because of the languages that they speak. You have, again, this concept of linguistic ecology, which Skutnabb-Kangas argues that the linguistic ecology of a given area becomes disturbed if you're constantly discriminating against certain languages. Then what happens is people make a shift towards other languages because they don't want to feel the shame of speaking those languages. So as a strategy to come into the mainstream, they move and shift to other languages, and when they do that, the whole ecological system of languages becomes distorted. You also have Philipson, who talks about linguistic imperialism, how a certain language like English language becomes so important that its hegemonic ideas, these ideas that English is superior to other languages, takes over the world in such a way almost equivalent to how colonialization was taking place. So it's a new way of colonizing the world, and people have to abide by the rules that are set by those powers because they still have more economic power than the other world. So Cummins, Norton talk about micro issues. They talk about the sociopolitics of language teaching and learning. And they argue, yes, it is very important for people to learn the dominant language, but it is also important to acknowledge the value of those languages which are in minority or which are spoken by minority speakers. They talk about the importance of critical pedagogy like others. And critical pedagogy, let me remind you, is a pedagogy in which somehow places the teaching and learning in a historical perspective, allows you to critically think about the way you can use a language, for instance, or the implications of the language that you're learning, and why it is important for you to be reminded that although you are learning a language and why it is considered important, and there is nothing intrinsic in that language that gives it a higher value. It's all about the power that you have given it. It's about the functions that you have allocated it so that you have expanded the language while you have not developed other languages. So it's about the use of its speakers, the status of its speakers, and nothing wrong with the languages itself. Again, Walker's study, a more recent one in 2006, talks about how when people's linguistic capital and cultural capital is devalued in higher education context, how they feel marginalized and it becomes difficult for them to participate. You have Rahman's work that is talking about how language is related to power and to ideology. You have Bourdieu is talking about, again, the same issues. So there are several people talking about the significance of language and inequality.